Imagine building a home for someone you can never see, never touch, and never depict. That was the challenge facing ancient Israel. Every surrounding culture filled their temples with statues of their gods. Israel built an elaborate sanctuary with a throne room at its center, but left the throne empty. Or did they? To understand this mystery, we need to walk through the sanctuary ourselves from the outside in. The Israelite sanctuary operated on the principle of graduated holiness, 3 concentric zones, each more restricted than the last, picture ripples moving inward toward the center. The outer courtyard welcomed all Israelites who came to worship. Step further in, and you reach the sanctuary proper, priests only. At the very center sat the Holy of Holies, a perfect cube of sacred space. One person could enter once per year, the high priest on Yom Kippur. This wasn't arbitrary architecture. The closer you move toward God's presence, the greater the holiness required. The structure itself taught theology. In the outer courtyard stood 2 essential objects. First, a large bronze altar with a ramp, no steps, preserving priestly modesty. Here, animals were sacrificed, their blood marking the boundary between ordinary and sacred. Nearby sat a bronze basin filled with water. Priests washed their hands and feet before approaching further, purification before presence. These weren't mere rituals. They embodied a core principle. Approaching the divine required preparation. You didn't stumble into God's presence, you prepared for it. Step past the courtyard into the sanctuary proper and the atmosphere shifts. 3 sacred objects filled this space, each engaging a different sense. The 7-branched menorah burned perpetually, light that never went out. The incense altar released fragrant smoke, rising upward, an ancient symbol of prayer ascending to heaven, and the table of showbread held 12 loaves, changed weekly, representing God's provision for the 12 tribes. Light, fragrance, bread. These weren't decorations, and they created an environment of divine hospitality. God as host, Israel as guest. The sensory experience prepared worshippers for what lay beyond the final curtain. Behind the curtain sat the Ark of the Covenant. 4 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, a wooden box covered entirely in gold. Inside rested the stone tablets of the covenant, the terms of Israel's relationship with their God. But the ark's most significant feature sat on top, the kapporeth, often translated mercy seat. 2 golden cherubim rose from this lid, their wings stretching toward each other, creating a space between them. That space mattered. That's where God's presence dwelt. Here's where it gets interesting. That throne room wasn't an Israelite invention. Throughout the ancient Near East, kings and gods were depicted seated on thrones flanked by winged creatures. Cherubim weren't chubby Renaissance babies. They were massive winged lions or composite creatures, guardians of sacred space. The ark functioned as a footstool. The cherubim formed the throne's sides. This was standard royal iconography. Every ancient viewer would recognize it immediately, a throne for a deity. But look closer at the Israelite version. Something's missing. No statue, no image, no physical representation of Yahweh. Israel's neighbors would have found this baffling. What's a throne without a king? What's a temple without a God you can see? This was Israel's aniconic revolution, worship without images. The second commandment prohibited making any image of God, not because God was absent, but because no image could capture divine reality. Any depiction would reduce the infinite to the finite. So Israel built the throne and left the seat apparently empty. Apparently. The throne wasn't empty, it was occupied by presence without form. When the tabernacle was completed, Exodus records what happened. A cloud descended and covered the tent. God's glory filled the sanctuary so intensely that even Moses couldn't enter. This cloud, called the Shekinah in later Jewish tradition, was God's visible presence, not a fixed form, not a statue, a dynamic, living presence that could move, lead, and dwell among the people. The cloud made the space holy, Architecture alone couldn't do that. This explains why the sanctuary was portable. The Mishkan, the Hebrew word means dwelling place, could be assembled and disassembled as Israel traveled. God's presence wasn't tied to a mountain or a city. It moved with the people, the cloud by day, fire by night, leading them through the wilderness. Sacred space was defined not by geography, but by relationship. The graduated holiness system taught Israel something profound. God is approachable, but on terms that respect divine holiness. The courtyard, the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, each threshold required greater preparation, greater purity, greater reverence, not because God was distant, but because God was dangerously present. The sanctuary's design embodied a theology. God is present, powerful, and approachable. The throne stands ready. The seat appears empty. But the cloud descends, the glory fills the space, and Israel learns that God dwells among them.